Are corporations evil? Can corporations serve a greater good in society and actually impact positive change in our world? Or are they fundamentally flawed by design? Let's discuss. So in this video, I want to start the conversation about corporations. Now, obviously, corporations are an incredible force and influence in our modern society. They are a part of everyday life in so many profound ways, in many ways that we really don't even acknowledge or think about on a regular basis. Corporations have incredible power and influence. In fact, they have the wealthiest corporations are larger than the majority of nation states, and they influence incredible power when it comes to our Congress and our governments. Some might go as far as to say that corporations, truly run this world and not the governments. Now, I want to explore in this video the fundamental roots of the corporation. What is the purpose of the corporation, and is it fundamentally flawed? And must we reevaluate how we've structured these corporations if we want to actually create real positive change in our society and create a world and an economy that actually serves humanity? Really, when most people think about corporations and think about the purpose of a corporation, we might think about things like, well, the purpose of corporations are, to create products and services in the marketplace that serve people, right? We think about the way that corporations are marketed to us in their advertising campaigns. Corporations that we love dearly. We have an emotional bond or affinity to them. We love the products and services that they provide. We wear their logos on our clothing, right? We're proud to display the products and services that we own from certain corporations. They give us, status, and they make us feel good about ourselves. What's rarely discussed by people is the costs associated with the products, services that corporations create. And that's something that I want to explore in this video. Now, what I've found really fascinating to observe in the last couple of years, dealing with this pandemic that we've been dealing with, is to watch how incredibly influential corporations can be to get people to, shift their fundamental beliefs. What I'm thinking about here specifically is the more left-leaning, politically left-leaning population of people, of which I would have grouped myself in with definitely throughout my 20s. I was very much still am, honestly, an environmentalist. I care about the environment. I care about the planet. I care about other people. I care about equality, social justice, all that kind of stuff. I also am against the elite and against corporate influence over governments. And so what's been fascinating for me to watch is to watch these people who used to be anti-corporate, against big global corporations, fighting against Monsanto, fighting against corporations who destroy the planet, destroy the earth, add to the pollution, do horrible things, child employment, horrible employment conditions for workers all around the world, et cetera, et cetera. So I've seen these people who were anti-corporate, anti-elite, the 99%. And yet now, all of a sudden, these same people are the big pharma corporations' biggest cheerleaders. These are the same people now who used to be against corporations because they understood how manipulative corporations were, whitewashing, greenwashing their marketing campaigns to make them seem so much better than they were as they wreaked havoc and destruction on our planet and on people. And yet all of a sudden now they've forgotten all of that, and they're the big pharma's biggest cheerleaders, helping to support, endorse, and fight for mandates to mandate the products of these big corporations. That's fascinating to see that transition. I'm really fascinated. What is it? And I mean, I know what it is. It's the fear propaganda that's been created by these corporations, the messaging that's been put out by these corporations to sell their products, to get these products into the bodies of as many humans as they possibly can. And the problem with that is, if we think that corporations have our best interest at heart, honestly, we're foolish. Because that is the most naive thing to believe in our society. You must be absolutely ignorant of what the purpose of a corporation truly is. I'm going to read out a section from the book, The Culture of Make-Believe. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of this book and Derek Jensen's work. I'm going to be reading different segments, different parts of this, and hopefully at some point I'll have Derek Jensen on for an interview in the upcoming podcast. But I want to read a section here that really describes what a corporation is. And this has been my understanding of corporations since my early 20s after reading this book. Now, understand that I've also been involved in business and marketing for the last 15 years. And I'm a big proponent of open market, free market capitalism. 100%. I'm not saying capitalism is the solution to all problems. Let's have a conversation about that in a future episode. But I do believe in the many benefits of open market capitalism. And so I'm a big supporter of business and corporations and free enterprise and the economy and all that kind of stuff. However, I also understand the limitations of a corporation and the dark side of corporations. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Now, before I read this section from Derek Jensen's description of corporations, just to juxtapose that, I want to read from the website, from the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance. There's an article here that I pulled up on the purpose of the corporation, and it's interesting just to juxtapose the two, because in this explanation here on their website, in this article from Harvard Business, we see how we are supposed to perceive corporations, how corporations are supposed to be an intrinsic part of our society. So let me read their description here. Now, they agree that there are many different definitions and understandings of the purpose of a corporation. And one of the sections here is they're talking about how the pandemic has disrupted settled expectations and it provokes fresh perspectives, which is awesome. Let's have fresh perspectives. Let's have new conversations about these topics. So they're stating here that we believe it's critical to the vitality of our economic system for corporations and the asset managers and investors who hold their shares to recognize that ESG and stakeholder purpose are necessary elements of sustainable business success, and to engage on a regular basis to rationalize their views as to governance and stewardship. These imperatives lead us to a simple formulation of corporate purpose. So here's what they are stating the purpose of a corporation should be. The purpose of a corporation is to conduct a lawful, ethical, profitable, and sustainable business in order to create value for the long term, which requires consideration of the stakeholders that are critical to its success. Stakeholders, this new term, which includes shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, creditors, and communities. So they're trying to expand this definition of the purpose of corporation that, hey, we're including everybody. We're looking out for everybody's interests. We really need to look at everybody's needs here, not just the shareholders, but the employees, the customers, suppliers, creditors, and communities that the corporations are involved in, as determined by the corporation and the board of directors, using its business judgment and with regular engagement with shareholders who are essential partners in supporting the corporation's pursuit of this mission. So they're trying to make it seem like corporations are supposed to have the best interests of not only the shareholders, but also all of the stakeholders as well, the customers, employees, and even the communities that they're a part of. Sounds wonderful, sounds beautiful, but is it possible? Is it even feasible when we understand and consider the true purpose of how our economy works, how our monetary system works, and that's another conversation, and what the true purpose of a corporation is? Now, let's go back a little bit in history. Corporations were created as a legal device, came into use, and I'm reading now from The Culture of Make-Believe from Derek Jensen. They came into use during the 18th and 19th centuries to deal with the myriad limits exceeded by our culture's social and economic system. The railroads and other early corporations were too big and too technological to be built or insured. And that's really key because this is where the insurance companies come into, or insured by the incorporator's investments alone. When corporations failed or caused gross public damage, as they often do and continue to do, the incorporators did not have the wealth to cover the damage. This is the whole process of externalizing costs, which is really important to understand here, to understand what we're dealing with if we're going to talk about solutions to these problems. No one did. No one has the wealth to cover this damage. Thus, a limit was placed on the investor's liability. This is the whole purpose of the corporation, on the amount of damage for which they could be held liable. Because of limited liability, corporations have allowed several generations of owners to economically, psychologically, and legally ignore the limits of toxics, fisheries depletion, debt, and so on that have been transgressed by the workings of our economic system. Corporations are the embodiment, the reification of a single idea, that of amassing wealth. To that end, they have been granted perpetual life and diversified ownership, each part of which has a limited liability for the debts and other liabilities of the firms. This limited liability means that each owner is not liable for the actions of the corporation. Investors can only lose the amount of money invested and are not held in any way accountable if the company commits genocide, ecocide, murder, or any other crime. Who is then? Who is held accountable? That's the question. Limited liability means more than just profits, however, and it means more than toxic waste dumps in minority neighborhoods. It's more than the mere institutionalization of irresponsibility. It is an explicit acknowledgement that it is impossible to amass great wealth without externalizing costs. If costs were not being externalized, there would be no limit, no need to limit liability. And there is the problem. The cost to produce the goods that we benefit from are so great that they need to limit liability because of the destruction created by corporations. Again, we go back to the fundamental point that civilization is destructive, and the products that civilization has created, i.e. our economic monetary system and corporations as a result, all of these products are then as a result destructive as well, as we can see. And here's the lesson for all of us. When we think about how corporations influence our lives, influence government, influence mandates and legislation, by now, we should have learned to expect corporations to function differently than they do is to engage in magical thinking. We may as well expect a clock to cook, a car to give birth, or a gun to plant flowers. The specific and explicit function of for-profit corporations is to amass wealth. Amass wealth for the corporation and its shareholders. That stock needs to keep going up, right? That stock needs to continue to have better earnings every quarter, more and more profits. Simple logic tells us that that's unsustainable. And where are the costs? The real costs, the true costs that aren't being calculated in the financials. The function is not to guarantee that children are raised in environments free of toxic chemicals. not to respect the autonomy or existence of indigenous peoples, nor to protect the vocational or personal integrity of workers, nor to design safe modes of transportation, nor to support life on this planet. Nor is the function to serve communities, regardless of the empty speak that we hear politicians and corporate CEOs talk about when they talk about stakeholders and considering the needs of employees, customers, creditors, and communities, because they're not considering those. It never has been, and it never will be. To expect corporations to do anything other than amass wealth is to ignore our culture's system of rewards, to ignore everything we know about behavior modification. We reward those investing in or running corporations for what they do, and so we can expect them to do it again. To expect corporations to do otherwise is delusional. Corporations are institutions created explicitly to separate humans from the effects of their actions. Let that sink in. Let that sink in with everything that's going on right now with the major big pharma corporations right now. They have absolutely zero liability for the products they are injecting in people's bodies all around the world. And they are forcing governments, based on the contracts that those governments have signed, they are forcing governments to mandate these products. And they're getting people, regular people, who are supposed to care about others to cheerlead and support those mandates of their products. Because somehow we've been led through ignorance to believe that they have our best interests in mind. How is that possible? Just look at Pfizer alone. That company is responsible for billions and billions of dollars in criminal lawsuits that they've been found guilty of multiple times on many occasions, including the world's largest lawsuit. We're talking bribery, paying off doctors, right? Misleading studies, paying off studies, all sorts of things that they've been found guilty of, experimenting on children, all of that. It's all documented. Just look at Pfizer's track record. And now all of a sudden we're cheerleading their products and saying that every human should put this in their body? Are you kidding me? How it's delusional thinking to think that these corporations have our best interests in mind. Corporations are institutions created explicitly to separate humans from the effects of their actions, making them by definition inhuman and inhumane. To the degree that we desire to live in a human and humane world, and really to the degree that we wish to survive, corporations need to be eliminated. Now, that's a bold statement. I understand that. However, I think this is a really important conversation to have when we're discussing business and capitalism and corporations. How much wealth is enough wealth? Is it true wealth when you're externalizing costs? When you're not liable for your actions? When you don't take responsibility for the damage you create in communities and towards other people? Is that true wealth? Really? I think these are questions that need to be asked. I think this is something that we seriously need to look at because we've created these entities that have rights like people do, and yet they have limited liability. They don't have the same responsibility that I, as an individual, have under the courts of law. These corporations can get away with the things that they get away with because of the way that they are structured and created. That's the whole purpose of why they were created, was to limit liability and externalize costs. Now, if we don't acknowledge that reality of a corporation, then how can we ever solve the problems that corporations create? Let's continue the conversation. This is a topic that I'd love to have more episodes on. I'd love to interview some guests, some podcast guests, on the podcast, obviously, but I want to hear right now, I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your thoughts. What does this stir up for you? Does this challenge some of your preconceived ideas or beliefs or feelings about corporations and what you think about corporations? Is it going too far to say that perhaps we need to eliminate corporations altogether? Right? How do we deal with this limited liability and this externalizing of costs? How do we get corporations to pay the true costs of the damage, the byproducts that are created in our society? Should a corporation like Pfizer be held liable for the effects of its products, for the adverse reactions, for the people that are dying as a result of the injections that are being put into people's bodies? Who should be liable if not the corporation? Please like, share this video widely, comment with your thoughts, your opinions, your viewpoints on this topic. Feel free to create some additional content, reaction content to this, whatever you like to do. Let's continue this conversation.